Ladies and gentlemen, it is my honor and privilege to introduce to you His Excellency Shambhu S. Kumaran, the Ambassador of the Republic of India. Welcome. Ambassador, we have here Mike Baños. He will lead the press call and he will take care of introducing all the others. We have here Abelin Naulugan, the Vice President of our chamber.
Yes.
Of course, we have John Asuncion from the local government unit of Cagayan de Oro City. All the rest will be introduced by engineer.
Welcome, sir. Hope you had a nice flight.
Thank you.
So I'd like to introduce the members of the press here. So we have Addison Arsua, of Storm Radio, and then
Nice to meet you, Ambassador.
Nice to meet you.
Peter Jerusalem of Philippine Daily Inquirer,
Nice to-
Monitor, Mindanao Today, and Davao Today. And then we have Mr. Lutson from Philippine News Agency, and I am with Business Week Mindanao.
Okay.
So we'd like to start, sir, with a short introduction from you.
Well, thank you very much to the Oro Chamber, Mr. Talimio, and all the other colleagues for setting up this interaction. And it's good to see all the representatives of the media here. And I must begin by saying I'm very delighted to be in the golden city of Cagayan de Oro. I have heard a lot about it, but it is as beautiful as it has been described. It's a beautiful landscape and wonderful people, and thank you very much for the very warm welcome at the airport also. Well, as you know, India and the Philippines, our relationship is progressing very rapidly in many areas. We have a very close political dialogue at a high level. The Prime Minister of India, Mr. Narendra Modi, and the President of the Philippines, Mr. Ferdinand Marcos, had a telephone conversation a couple of months ago. And of course, there have been regular meetings at the ministerial level. And we consult each other quite closely on various bilateral, regional, and global developments. The relationship between our countries is very old, centuries old, and there's a lot of cultural legacy that we have among our people, and there's a very strong people-to-people relationship also between Indians and Filipinos. But really the engine of the relationship is the economic, commercial, the trade and investment partnership, if you will. So moving into the trade and investment partnership, we see several areas are doing quite well. The IT BPO sector is one area where we work very closely together. Almost all the major Indian IT services companies have a very strong presence in the Philippines, and there's good cooperation. Healthcare and pharmaceuticals in particular is another area where we're working very closely. And this is an area where India is widely regarded as a very strong actor in the world. And we're quite happy that our companies have been working quite intensively in the Philippines over the past few years. And India has established itself as the pharmacy of the world, and our medications are renowned for their quality at an affordable price. But now we're looking at expanding this partnership into some newer areas, and agriculture, financial technology, and in general the digital governance initiatives that have been unveiled in India. These are areas of great interest in our bilateral partnership also. So specifically here, this visit is coinciding with the Mindanao Food Congress, which is the leading event for the agriculture and food sector And I'm aware that Mindanao is doing quite well in agriculture, and it has the potential to do even better. And surely the experience in India, where we have, in the short span of about 50 years, because well into the 1970s, India was an importer of food. And last year, we were the world's largest exporter of agricultural products and food grains in particular. One of the largest agricultural exporters and the largest food grain exporter, especially of rice. So this has of course been possible because of various initiatives. And we would like to bring some of those experiences, and we would like to introduce our companies to the Philippines. Because I do believe that the Philippines and Indian experiences has a lot of similarities. You also have relatively small farms. For many years, our agriculture also suffered from weak mechanization. And what we have managed to do in India is, of course, use that, use the larger industrial capacity in the country to try and expand our agricultural productivity. It's still work in progress, but we've done fairly well. And I'm sure that this partnership between Indian and Philippines companies in the area of agriculture will be very promising. We already do have a lot of Indian companies that are here, and some of them are represented at the Expo. And I hope that this will provide a certain, shall we say, this partner country participation will provide a certain impetus to our engagement in this important sector. But I really don't want to see this engagement purely limited to agriculture. I do want to reiterate that we are very much interested in a very broader economic engagement with the Philippines. And I think that the Mindanao region, with its very favorable geography and agroclimatic conditions, but also because of the proactive industrial efforts, investment efforts that you're undertaking, could be an area of interest for Indian companies in general. So let me stop there with my initial comments, and I'm quite happy to take any questions that you might have.
So, anybody wants to start? Ne?
Yeah, Nat Lugzon from Philippine News Agency. It's a government news service. And probably my question is somehow related in this region, Northern Mindanao region. And I'd like to know if, how far have you been studying this Region 10, Northern Mindanao and Cagayan de Oro, and how is it viable for other potential industry that the Indian commerce and industry could possibly forge partnerships towards development? Any particular industry that would be viable or that would be sustainable in probably years to come, despite the changes of leadership?
Let me answer that question in two parts. Firstly, I think it's important for us to accept that we do have a shortage of awareness about India in this region and about this region in India. So one of the important things, and I'm very happy that I'm speaking to the media here, is that we need to build a more informed constituency of businesses in both India and the Philippines, in particular in Mindanao. And I think this sort of event, which will capture the attention of businesses, is very important. Beyond that, when you want to get into sectors, obviously we are going to be focusing on agriculture in this area. And in agriculture, obviously, we'll be looking at the food grain sector, which is essentially, in the Philippines context, rice and I think corn as well. So broadly speaking, what we'll be looking at is the entire value chain in agriculture, from seeds to agricultural implements, to micronutrients, to agronomic practices, to harvesting techniques, to post-harvest and storage, and of course the most important thing is to have good access to the market, a good price for the farmer, and also the ability to process the food before it goes waste. So storage is very important, but also processing is very important. So you see this is an entire value chain, and there are a lot of supporting elements here, because financing for agriculture is also a very important element. Crop insurance is a very important element. So a few months ago we had actually done a workshop on crop insurance for the Philippine Crop Insurance Corporation officials and the Department of Finance in the Philippines, with the representatives of India's very major, one of the world's largest crop insurance schemes, very successfully being implemented in India. And underlying this is the big opportunity, I think, that is the digital opportunity in agriculture. And I think the effort here is to try and use what is called agri-tech, whether it is startups or whether it is digitalizing existing methodologies. I spoke about post-harvest, harvest, getting products to market. So this area is very much in focus. And in all of this activity, even in crop insurance, for example, there is greater use of big data analytics to try and support this effort in crop insurance, to try and, in a way, both empower the farmer and also ensure that the schemes are not misused by some other vested interest. So there's a very broad avenue that I'm looking at. We obviously will be happy to also look at horticulture, which is fruits and vegetables. We're quite happy to look at the animal husbandry and the dairy sector, which is in an area where India is very strong. We're the world's largest producer of milk. So I think what we're going to do is to A, generate awareness, and B, try and get the companies to try and look into concrete opportunities across the agricultural value chain.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, another question would
Please.
be, I'm so interested when it comes to, you just mentioned agri-based technology, and it involves ICT and data sciences, which leads me to another question, is that how are talks with local businesses here when it comes to digital infrastructure, and how is it developing? And another one is entirely separate. I'm curious about, well, in Davao, there's a lot of Indian community already because of the concentration of students,
Yes.
physical field. Would it be a good opportunity to, in terms of human resources and engaging with different communities in terms of public health and other probably areas that could India help with Philippine community, especially in Mindanao?
Yeah, I mean, you raise a few very important points. Of course, the presence of the Indian students in Davao and Mindanao is something that we welcome, and we really see them as a bridge that connects our countries. In fact, the Indian community in the Philippines is something that we regard as a very important bridge, a living bridge that connects our societies. But looking beyond that, in terms of healthcare, as I mentioned, we're already seeing a very strong pharmaceutical sector engagement. We hope that we can try and look at deepening that engagement, including through local manufacturing efforts around, to try and see how we can encourage that. The President has himself expressed interest in this area, and we've been continuously trying to see how we could bring that to fruition. But beyond healthcare, as you mentioned, technology is beginning to drive transformational growth in various sectors: healthcare, agriculture, financial technology, educational technologies. So we do want to bring more and more Indian companies in the agri-tech and other technological areas into the Philippines. We also see a big opportunity in terms of skilling, as you said, training and human resource development, capacity building. India is very strong in the area of education and training. We have ongoing scholarship programs. We want to bring our training companies to the Philippines. I had a very good meeting with Vice President Sara Duterte, and we spoke specifically about educational technology. Really, the idea is to have more and more opportunities like this one, where we can have B2B events with the support of both the governments and bodies like the industry chambers, the Oro chamber. So it's really a whole of society approach to try and bridge the gaps in awareness and to have more connections, because at the end of the day you'd agree that governments, embassies and chambers can only do so much. It's the companies that have to finally take up the lead and bring the cooperation together. The good thing is that there are as I said, all the major IT companies from India are in the Philippines. Some of you may be aware that an Indian IT company is doing the national ID project in the Philippines. There are other companies that are working in other areas of digital governance and digital empowerment. And broadly speaking, I would say that India's experience under Prime Minister Modi's Digital India initiative to try and take governance to the bottom half of the pyramid in our societies, because we have to be always conscious about the requirements of our less privileged part of our population. So what the Prime Minister did in India was to initiate a massive program for financial inclusion through something called the Jan Dhan accounts, the People's Wealth accounts, where you could open accounts for free with all the banks, and then have direct benefits transferred using our foundational national ID called the Aadhaar. So using the bank accounts, mobiles and the direct benefits through Aadhaar, we were able to transfer the welfare payments even during COVID to hundreds of millions of people. And this is a global achievement which we are very proud of. And I think there is interest in the Philippines government also to look at this activity. I have briefed His Excellency the President about it. I've had an opportunity to speak to the Finance Secretary about it. And I do believe that over the next few months, we will be working towards holding a large India-Philippines technology-related event. And this is where we will have all of these various digital companies coming to the Philippines and offering their packages, apps, programs and capabilities to Philippines companies.
Artisan Ursoa, 90.3 Strong Radio. I have learned from my friend in India, from the pharma business, that the cost of living in India is more affordable than the Philippines, or lesser than the Philippines. My question is why?
Well, I think the reasons are manifold. Obviously, one part of it relates to domestic capacities to manufacture, rather than when you're importing more products, then obviously the prices can be a little higher. Secondly, I think the size of the market in India is of course very large. And thirdly, as I was mentioning, there is more information in the market. So consumers are aware of the prices and the sellers are aware of the prices. Consumers are very discerning about the prices. So there is pressure on the companies to sell at a competitive price. So it's an element that combines various factors. But surely there's something for us to be learning from each other also in this area as to how we can provide more support, especially to the less privileged parts of our population.
Another question. One of the pressing issues in the Philippines is unemployment. Is there any employment opportunities for the Filipinos in India? And when there is, if there are employment opportunities, do we still have to secure for a visa, sir?
Yes, so there is not a large number of Filipinos looking for employment in India, but what we are seeing is, as I was mentioning, the Indian BPO companies who are in the Philippines are already employing close to 200,000 Filipinos in the Philippines. And obviously we do have a lot of service sectors where Indians and Filipinos are working. I do sense that this is not a labor-related relationship like some of your other relationships, but I see this more as a trade and investment-driven relationship.
Good afternoon, Ambassador. Chief Jerusalem, Philippine Daily Inquirer, sir. You mentioned about your desire to share your technology and best practices to our farmers, especially in the agricultural sector. My question, sir, is what do you think is the contribution of the Philippines to this partnership between India and our country?
You see, what I would like to do is to look at this from a broader perspective. What we saw during COVID was that the agriculture sector's importance became very evident because food security began to be talked about in the same terms as health security. And they are indeed two sides of the same coin. And countries like the Philippines with very large populations and people who are not always economically very well off required to be sustained and supported. So what we are trying to do is to, unlike some of the other partnerships that you may have, we want to look at this as a mutually beneficial relationship where we are not looking at purely exporting our products, but also partnering with Philippines to create production capacities here and to empower your agriculture sector using the techniques, the tools that we have successfully used in India. And through that, of course, our companies also grow, but we really see this as a connected growth. When your economy grows, we saw that in the BPO sector. When the Philippines BPO sector grew along with the Indian BPO sector. So some try to see this as a competitive growth. I don't see this as competitive. I see this as positively connected. And in the agriculture sector also, I think this positive connection is sustainable. Because as I was saying, India's experience is relevant to the Philippines because our farm sector is very similar to the Philippines farm sector. Unlike some of the very advanced markets where you might feel it's useful to emulate, but in India the centerpiece is really the farmer who's not as well subsidized as in some of the other big advanced markets. So this is, I think, the key message. The key takeaway is that here is a already scaled up and successful model that has the same underlying parameters as the Philippines. And I think this is where the opportunity lies in using what India has developed to create your own capacities.
Thank you, sir.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
I am Shambhu of the Philippine Information Agency, Region 10. So we're actually very glad that we had this talakayan with our chamber, and they mentioned that the Indian government is partnering with this event. And how is your preparation, and what's going to happen? What can we expect for the event?
Okay, so we had a couple of interactions with the Oro Chamber in the preparation to this event, and my colleagues also visited the Cagayan de Oro earlier to have further discussions. What we found was that the Oro Chamber has a very forward-looking approach to support businesses, and we were encouraged by that. And from the embassy, what we've been trying to consciously do is to move our business engagement out of Manila because sometimes you tend to get, all the energies tend to get absorbed in Manila, and then the regions don't get the attention. So we've been consciously going out. We did events in Baguio, and we've been doing some things in Davao, and now we are in Cagayan de Oro. So the idea is that the engagement with various regional centers of importance is being prioritized. So that's one element of it. Secondly, I think you missed the initial part where we spoke about the importance of agriculture. This is a very critical sector in the post-pandemic phase. Food security has become very important. So we believe that there's a lot of scope for collaboration in this key area. And we do have a very strong presence as partner country at the Mindanao Food Congress, which is one of the leading events in this sector in the Philippines itself. And obviously we don't see this as a one-off. We see this as the beginning of a more regular engagement. I'm very much looking forward to the Oro Chamber mounting a delegation to visit India soon, maybe next year. And we'd be very happy to support them and to have their companies visit some of the leading Indian companies and take forward that engagement at the B2B, business to business level.
Thank you, Mr. Ambassador. Mike Banyos from Business Week Mindanao. First, I'd like to acknowledge and thank our friends from Indian Business Forum Association of the Philippines for visiting us and bringing Diwali to Cagayan de Oro. What can we expect from the festival? There's a lot of excitement regarding this event tomorrow, Mr. Ambassador.
Thank you very much for bringing that up. I mean, Diwali, as you know, is the festival of light. It's the festival that celebrates the victory of light over darkness. It's really a festival that celebrates the innate goodness, the victory of goodness over evil, if you will. So it's really something that in the post-pandemic world, with all the troubles that we have, is a festival that really speaks to a lot of us. And we are happy that the event is just following immediately after Diwali. We're going to bring some popular Indian music and dance. This is a folk dance from Punjab, which will be performed. It's the Bhangra, which is a very energetic and pulsating dance. It's performed a lot during the harvest season, so it has an agricultural connection in some way. We also have Indian food, which is gaining greater popularity in the Philippines. We're very happy to see that people are beginning to look beyond the stereotype that it's very spicy and so on, and they will hopefully get to appreciate the various flavors that we have. And as you rightly said, we have a strong presence from Indian business. The Indian Business Forum, which is the premier organization of Indian businesses active in the Philippines. The president, Mr. Dilip Tiwari, is there, and other members. Very happy to see them here, and they will hopefully be able to carry forward this conversation. But it's good that you mentioned the festival and the culture, because underlying this relationship, we believe are the people of India and the Philippines. We are among the largest democracies in the world, India and the Philippines. And our relationship is at the heart of it, a relationship between people. It is a people-centric partnership, as we in the embassy see it. So this sort of engagement also brings people together and strengthens our people-to-people connection.
I'd like to do a follow-up question regarding global presence of the Indian economy and influence. Can we have your feedback about, with India now being the world's largest democracy and the recent elevation of Rishi Sunak as Prime Minister of Britain and Kamala Harris as Vice President of the United States? Do you think India would now have a stronger global influence on the forthcoming events in the coming days?
Well, thank you for that question. I don't know how many of you are aware, but I'd like to inform you that this is the 75th year of India's independence this year. So, like the Philippines, we did go through a difficult period when we were, under colonial domination. But now that we have been successfully functioning for many years as a functioning democracy, we see the genius and the skills of the Indian people are beginning to express themselves in India and abroad. And obviously, some of the people you mentioned have very strong Indian connections, and we're very proud of that, and we wish them well. And we do see this as a global phenomenon where India's regaining, in a sense, because up until the 18th century, India was one of the largest, among the top largest economies in the world. Our people were renowned for their craftsmanship, their textiles, their productivity, and their skills in art, architecture, etc. So we see us returning to the world, contributing positively as a force of stability, as a peaceful country that has no ill intentions towards other countries, as a friendly democracy, particularly to other democracies like the Philippines. So we really are witnessing the 21st century India coming into its own, and the talents and the genius of India's people, which again, as I mentioned, we really see our people as our greatest asset. And this is why I think these successes, the names that you mentioned, are all a reflection of that underlying quest for doing better, improving our conditions. And we are looking at partnerships, because we do realize that true value comes with partnerships, and therefore we want to also build this partnership with our friends in the Philippines.
Thank you for that. Actually, my question was connected, but I'm going to reframe probably, focusing on the agriculture. You mentioned earlier about that agriculture must be strengthened, so that in India we know and realize that you're using technology. What do you think is your advice to the Philippines in how we can also improve our own agriculture sector here? What did you do differently?
Well, I think each country will have to find its way, and in India we definitely don't want to sound prescriptive, or we don't want to sound like we have the answers. What we can do is we can share what we have done, and you can then decide on the basis of your knowledge of your own situation what works best. So let me be very clear, that's the framework. This is not India coming and telling you that we've cracked the problem, so this is how you need to do it. What we see is that there is obviously value in creating the enabling conditions. I spoke about things like crop insurance, things like financial support to the farmer, looking at prices. In India we have support prices which enable the farmer to realize a certain value of his output, his or her output. And of course the inputs that need to go in there, whether it's in terms of seeds, fertilizers, and also increasingly using digital technology. Agri-tech is the word that's used to try and elevate the productivity. In India, we've also done very well in terms of developing cost-effective agricultural implements across the value chain. We're doing very well in irrigation, for example, in pumps, pump sets, and these are now moving towards solarized pump sets. We're looking at storage and food processing technologies. So all of these areas, you find that the challenge is really to produce affordably, and in a climate sensitive way, ecologically sensitive way. And this is a challenge because clearly the agricultural practices that have been followed for many years were not entirely on this basis. So one other area where we think the Philippines can benefit is looking at multi-cropping, because really it's not enough to grow one crop, and also supporting the farmer with other interventions like animal husbandry, dairying activity as a supplementary income, because prices can vary, outputs can vary. In India, a lot of the agriculture is still rain-fed, so we are dependent still on the monsoons. So these are all areas where our experience, I think, speaks to what the Philippines farmer is also facing. And this is why I think at the highest level, with the president, when I had the opportunity to call on him, and later when the Prime Minister spoke to the president, they agreed that agriculture could be an area of priority for the India-Philippines relationship.
Does it mean that agriculture must be allocated with the highest budget, sir?
So there is obviously a need for state support. There is clearly, given the central importance of agriculture in terms of addressing hunger, poverty, social stability, and food security, really the state cannot hold itself back. But obviously when you're talking budgets, you're talking about various competing demands. You have healthcare, you have education, you have other very competing demands. So it is always a matter of judgment, a political judgment, which is obviously for the Philippines government to say. But in India, what we've done is obviously provided a good degree of support, but also tried to introduce more and more private capital and financial tools from the banks and other channels to support farming. Because it's not always going to be possible to only use budgetary resources to support farming.
You're referring to private-public partnership?
Yes,
Like
yes. That's an element of it, private-public partnership, and creating essentially commercially viable farming so that banks and other financial institutions can come in and effectively take part. I know in the Philippines you have the Agri-Agra law, which mandates a certain amount of bank lending should go into agriculture, and I think definitely if that quantum of lending were to go into agriculture, it would help. And that's where things like crop insurance schemes and others would come in, because unless the banking community feels that the lending is viable, then that extension of lending is not there. So it's a ongoing two-way dialogue between the farming community, the government, and the banks, so that everybody can address the pain points and have a successful sector. It's a process. I think the Philippines is doing a lot, and we support what the government is doing.
Sir, I'd like to ask you something different, which is not connected to agriculture.
Yes.
But this is regarding the recent acquisition of our armed forces of the BrahMos missile.
Yes.
I think this is important because this is the first export sales of India ever for this particular kind of
System.
weaponry. So, what sort of future do you see India having to expand this initial transaction in the future with our armed forces?
So I'd like to look at this relationship on the defense and security side as an important part of the new India-Philippines relationship, because we do feel that in this architecture, what we call in the Indo-Pacific, it's very important for countries to be able to meet their national security objectives by working with trusted partners. We would like to be a trusted partner for the Philippines. The acquisition of the BrahMos missile system is something that we are very, very appreciative of. And we do feel that this can obviously lead to other systems which we are quite happy from India to offer. You may be aware that India's defense sector is growing quite rapidly. We are currently focusing very strongly on defense industrialization, and there's a similar focus in the Philippines also. So we'd like to work with those priorities in mind. But underlying this, I think there is a strong rationale, which is the fact that we do see a strong and resilient Philippines in the Indo-Pacific as something it is in our interest and we would do whatever we can to work with the Philippines government to support that.
Ambassador, thank you very much for the invitation to come up with a trade mission. Early on, we have already agreed that with the Department of Science and Technology, we will visit India. And our focus will be, among others, the nutraceutical sector. And of course, among others, we will also consider the help that India can give, especially for Cagayan de Oro, regarding the development of our cashew nuts industry. Because we know that you are one of the biggest, if not the biggest in the world, as producer of cashew nuts. So we would like to firm up the mission sometime late February next year for the visit.
Well, and we'll be quite happy to support it. In fact, my home state of Kerala is one of the world's top producers of good cashew nuts. They do a lot of exports as well, so we'll be quite happy to see. And frankly, the landscape here reminds me of my home state. So I felt like somehow taking a plane from Manila and landed in Kerala. But I'm sure we can cover cashews.
We're fully satisfied.
So we're okay.
We might ask questions.
Thank you, Mr. Ambassador. Maybe we can formally close our interview.
I believe there's some interaction time tomorrow as well. So thank you very much all of you for coming in. And I do hope you'll have a cup of coffee with us.
Yes, guys.
Happy to
Yes, guys.
in the course of the next day or two.
Okay.